So for week 7, you have the peer mark assignment, which was due today. Hopefully you got that done. You had to review 2 students' essays. So by Monday, you need to polish and submit the final draft of your research paper. That's due by Monday. And you also have 2 quizzes, one based on Chapter 6 and another based on Chapter 7. No, I'll put it in there. I'll put it in there today. If you didn't get it in, then yes, it'd be a 0 for the peer mark, but not for the final draft. You can still submit that. I think the peer mark is closed, and I can't even adjust those settings. Like once that's set, I can't go back and change the times or the dates on those. It just doesn't allow me to. Some of the things in Angel I can, but with those peer marks and the Turnitin drop boxes, those are really, really strict on the dates. What's that? It's in the category for discussion and peer editing. So you'll get another opportunity for a grade in that category. So you had 1 for the persuasive, 1 for the research paper, and 1 for the literary analysis, which we're going to do. So hopefully it won't affect you too much as long as you get those other 2 done. All right, but you also have quizzes on Chapter 6 and 7. We covered Chapter 6 on Monday. That was compare and contrast. And today we're going to look at Chapter 7. So it's page 195 in your book. This is another kind of what kind of writing do we do in this class? I gave it to you on Monday. We looked at that resource from Purdue OWL. What do we call the kind of writing where you use a thesis statement and you back it up with evidence? Right on here it says read and take notes from the Purdue OWL website. We looked at it briefly in class, and there was a word that starts with E that we use to describe this kind of writing. It'll be our word of the week. Cause and effect writing, persuasive writing, compare and contrast writing. Expository is correct. It's expository writing. Okay, so cause and effect writing is just another type of expository writing, which means that it uses a thesis statement and it uses evidence to help support that thesis statement. Okay, so you can do it as a compare and contrast. You could do an entire cause and effect essay. It's all expository. All right, even if you don't use cause and effect or compare and contrast or descriptive, you could still write a basic persuasive essay that is expository because it uses a thesis statement and it backs that thesis statement up with evidence, right? So that's all we're talking about there. All right, so with cause and effect, the chapter starts out with an example. So let's read it together and we'll talk a little bit about this example. It says the school board of a suburban town near Denver has decided to ask the voters to approve a large increase in property tax assessments in order to construct a new high school. The board knows that at best its request will be unwelcome. It launches a vigorous campaign to make the voters more favorably inclined. Right? If you're going to raise taxes on people, it's not usually an easy thing to do, so you might have to work a little bit to do it. Part of the campaign is a pamphlet setting forth the board's case. The pamphlet of necessity presents a study of cause and effect relationships. Cause and effect relationships are all around us. Pretty much everything you see or hear in the news, like just strictly news, is cause and effect. You know, it's investigative reporting deals all with cause and effect. Why did this happen? Why did that happen? What are the effects of this policy or that policy? All right, so cause and effects are all around us, those kind of relationships. In this case, next paragraph, the board first states the causes for its request. Student enrollment has more than doubled. 3 years ago, the board tried to cope with this problem by going to 2 sessions, but the classrooms are still too crowded for basic physical comfort, as well as for optimum learning conditions. Moreover, the situation is not temporary. Current enrollment in the junior high and elementary schools assures continued increases in the student population. Finally, the building is in poor physical condition. The roof leaks, the basement floods, the boiler is on its last legs. The board has investigated the possibility of remodeling and expanding the old building, and it has found that cost for that project would mean an average of only $135 a year less in taxes per family than if a completely new school were built. Next, the board discusses the results or the effects of voter approval. The town's leading eyesore will be replaced by a beautiful new structure in which everyone can take pride. New facilities for the most modern teaching devices will improve the quality of education. Experienced teachers will be more inclined to stay than to seek new employment. The strength of the town's educational system will be a selling point for new residents and consequently will increase property values. So, causes and effects, right? Here's why we need a new school. Here are the causes for needing a school. Here are the effects if we get a new school. The school board's pamphlet, in short, presents a thesis. The proposal for a new high school should be approved. We have a subject and an opinion, right? The thesis needs a subject and an opinion. So the subject, new school. No, the subject would be the new building. Yeah, that's the subject. And the opinion is the community needs one. Well, you need a should or should not. So the community should build a new school. So you've got your subject and your opinion. You could include taxes. You could say the subject is the new school. The opinion is that people should pay higher taxes in order to get the new school. Same idea. It says it's worth noting here that cause and effect relationships can sometimes shift. In the first part of the pamphlet, for example, the proposal to build a new school is the effect that was caused by overcrowding and a decaying building. In the second part of the pamphlet, however, the approved proposal becomes the cause of such beneficial effects as beauty and improved education. A cause creates an effect, but that effect in turn can become the cause of another effect. No problems are likely to arise as long as the writer keeps any shifting relationships clearly in mind. So, I've already drawn a little diagram of how it works, but I'll redraw it just so you can follow. So we start out with this idea of needing a new school. I'm going to put that in the middle there. All right, they say we need a new school, but why do they need the new school? They said it was overcrowded, right? Overcrowded, run down. So these two things then are what? Those are causes, exactly. So here we'll call this cause 1, we'll call this cause 2. All right, two causes leading to a desired effect, which would be the new school, right? So in this case, a new school, or the desire for a new school, is an effect, right? They cause this need for a new school. The new school itself, though, they say if we get a new school, it will lead to, better education. I think they said better education because of the technology. Teachers will stay. I think it maybe said one more thing, too. It would be like a source of pride for the community. And it also said, because of all of these things, they said property values will go up eventually. So what happens is this effect, the new school, the desired effect, becomes the cause of new effects, right? So it's not just an effect, it's also a cause, right? Cause number 3, I guess. And this cause of having a new school leads to this effect, and this effect. And these 3 effects combined become the cause of increased property values, right? So causes and effects, sometimes they could be the same thing, right? Sometimes, right here, this new school, it's not just an effect, but it's also a cause. These things were effects, but they also cause something else. Well, or for people. If property values go up, that's good for the people that own homes. True. I'd rather have $1 million house and have to pay $10,000 in taxes than have a $100,000 house and pay $1,000 in taxes. Because I could sell that $1 million house, right? And then buy a $500,000 house and pay less taxes. I like the way you think, though. All right, so it's all about cause and effect relationships. This particular example shows us how we can have a chain of cause and effect relationships, but they're not always that complicated. They're not always, a cause and effect essay will not always detail a whole chain of cause and effect relationships. Sometimes you'll just have something that looks like this. Maybe one cause leading to one effect. And that might be like how the thesis statement is based, just like that. So it might say, getting more sleep at night will help you do better in school. Cause, more sleep at night. Effect, better grades. That could be the thesis, right? Because it's kind of an opinion. You have to prove it. You could say students should get more sleep at night if they want to get better grades, right? And then the rest of the paper is going to prove that with evidence. Does that make sense? So it could be as simple as that. You could also have multiple causes leading to one effect. So visiting the doctor regularly, eating well, and exercising will lead to optimum health. That would be the effects, right? The optimum health. So that's true. That's true. So you can have multiple causes with one effect. That's another way you might see it. You might have one cause with multiple effects. If you smoke cigarettes, you may get lung cancer, your life will be shorter, and you'll end up spending a lot of your money on tobacco products. No? What? No, you're smoking the cigarettes, huh? Well, you're going to get cancer, you're not going to live as long, and you're going to spend lots of money on your cigarettes. It's true. It's true. So you could have one cause, smoking, leading to multiple effects. All right? You could also have, this one gets complicated, multiple causes, multiple effects. So this is like a complex idea. This one, you want an example for this one? All right. Okay. A lack of oversight in the banking industry. Lack of oversight in the banking industry, people's desire to own homes, and fraud. Well, that would be lack of oversight in the banking industry. And a desire for, and greed, and just corporate greed led to a housing collapse, unemployment, and tighter credit restrictions. Okay, so it's very, well, I didn't have one ready to go. That's the hardest part of teaching sometimes, is coming up with examples. But something like that. So you've got all these complicated causes leading to all these effects. Okay, so that, but they're all still related, right? And they kind of like follow, like all of these effects follow these things. You could also have, am I missing something? You could have what we saw in the video and what we talked about with the school. So you start out with an original cause, which leads to an effect, which becomes a cause, which leads to an effect, which becomes a cause for the next effect. And this is your chain, and it usually leads to, one effect. This is your chain. This is your cause and effect chain of events. Does that make sense? All right. Yeah, like getting paint splattered all over. All right. So thesis statements will usually define what type of relationship you're dealing with. The thesis statement will say, people should not smoke cigarettes because they will end up with A, B, and C. Okay? That is correct. It could. All right, so let's go back to the book. Let's flip to page 196. It says, many classroom papers are not lengthy enough to give equal weight to cause and effect, so they emphasize one over the other. So if you're writing this essay, it's going to emphasize either the cause or the effect. If it says, what was the example I gave for this first one? I forget. What did I say here? Come on, y'all got to pay attention. I know, but what was it? No short-term memories, huh? One cause, one effect. Oh, sleep and grades. See? Sleep and grades. So students should get more sleep in order to do better in school. Probably this type of essay will focus just on the cause and say they should get more sleep. There are studies about sleep, and here's what they could do to get better sleep, and eventually they will get better grades. But it could go the other way. You could say students get more sleep, and there are studies that show, grades among students that get 8 hours of sleep are better, and their test scores are higher, and they get to school on time more. So you could do either cause or effect, but usually you focus more on one than the other. If you're doing something like this, you're probably going to focus more on the causes, right? Because you have 3 causes leading to 1 effect. If you're doing something like this, you're going to focus probably more on the effects because you have 3 of those in just 1 cause. All right, so it just depends, but you're limited, especially in this class, because the only time you might write a cause and effect essay is when? That's right, on the final exam, right? It's a timed essay. So you'll have an option to do the cause and effect if you want to, if that topic works for you. No, I can't give you the topic. Yeah, because then you could go home and like prepare it and outline it and know exactly what's right. No, can't do that. Can't do that. Nope, can't do it. Because some people will just memorize it and just recite it. I am telling you though what the five modes are. So it could be. Yes, it does. You need to learn how to outline. You need to devote the first 20 minutes of that final exam to outlining and just saying, okay, here's my thesis, here's my first point, my second point, my third point. If you can do that, you can't do that in 20 minutes? We're going to practice, okay? I'm going to give you an opportunity to practice in class. We're going to take 2 hours in class. You're going to have a chance to write an essay in 2 hours. And it will count for a grade. And it's just a completion grade. I'm not going to go through and mark anything wrong. If you do it, it's 100. If you don't show up that day, it's a 0. All right, so you'll get a chance to practice.
You know what I write is when I write the thesis, then I go to something that leads to something else. I can't say it and go this, and then I'm gonna write about this and this. Then I can't do it together that way. I have to do it as I do it. So if you want me to do it, then write my outline.
If you want to do it that way, you can. I usually suggest that people try to come up with some kind of basic outline first so you don't get off track. Because you're writing one thesis and then you're supporting it with multiple points, right? If I want to prove that Chick-fil-A is the best fast food restaurant, I'm going to do that by saying it has the best food, the best service, and the cleanest restaurants. Those are my 3 points that all directly support one thesis statement.
I know that subject to start with. You know, like accounting, I know some, but I don't know it all, so I wouldn't know what even if it's about fraud. I would not know what it's about until I see.
For the 5 topics you're going to have on the final exam, I guarantee at least one of them you'll be familiar enough with to write an essay. I picked general things. Well, that could be 1 out of the 5. You'll still have 4 others to choose from. So they won't, all 5 won't be based on TV. You know, I'll pick different things. Okay. All right, back to the book. So it says, usually they emphasize cause or effect more than the other. I'm going to skip down to bottom of page 196. It says, do not oversimplify your causes. All right, so even if you don't choose to write a cause and effect essay for your final exam, you still need to know these points for your quiz this week. All right, so suggestion number 1, recommendation number 1, don't oversimplify your causes. What does this mean? It says most subjects worth writing about have more than one cause. Sometimes particular combinations of causes have to be present at the same time and in certain proportions to bring about a particular result. For example, attributing a young man's delinquency solely to the poverty of his family oversimplifies what everyone knows about life. Poverty may have been a contributing cause, but there had to have been others as well. Plenty of poor children do not become delinquents, and plenty of rich ones do. So you can't say that this person became a delinquent because they were poor. That's not fair, because it's not logical, right? Because that's saying that anyone that's poor will become a delinquent, and that's not true. So that's not a valid argument. So it's saying don't oversimplify. If there are other factors, you have to pay attention to those, and you have to mention those. It says, beware especially of the post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy. Anybody remember what that is? 1,000,000 bonus points if you remember. It was one of them.
Where that guy was, like he was saying, sort of like making it, it's sort of like trying to make a defense of something coming out of defense.
It's a type of logical fallacy. All right, it's too late. Time has passed. It says, here's what it means. It means after this, therefore, because of this. That's what it literally means. That's the literal translation. You could have.
I was looking for
That's the literal translation. After this, therefore, because of this. So here's an example. After Herbert Hoover was elected president, America had a depression. Therefore, America had a depression because Herbert Hoover was elected. It's not fair, right? It could be, or it could not be, right? Just because one thing happens after another thing doesn't mean that the first thing caused the second thing, right? Think about superstitions, right? People say, oh, I broke my mirror this morning, and then I got in a car wreck. So I got in a car wreck because I broke my mirror. Is there really a logical connection between breaking a mirror and a car wreck? Not really, all right? So that's what this fallacy is. It says an argument like this depends purely on accident of time. The writer must point out, if possible, actual policies of the Hoover administration that brought about the Depression. There has to be a connection, right? Not just one thing happened, then another thing happened. Otherwise, the argument has no more logical validity than I lost my job after a black cat crossed my path. Therefore, I lost my job because a black cat crossed my path.
Gosh, I remember growing up,
That's right.
my aunt that I lived with, oh my gosh.
Is she superstitious?
Oh my
I
gosh.
asked them out, and I'm not superstitious.
I bet there's a million ants across me.
Just because.
All right, so that is your logical fallacy for the week. All right, there may be a quiz
So in
question
other words,
related
it
to
said
that.
give something.
You have to tie the things together. It has to. You have to move beyond. You have to move beyond the chronology of events. You have to move beyond when things happened and show relationships and talk about the why and how.
Like
All right.
we raise taxes so high.
Yes. Yes. Right. You have to show policies and actions that were taken, not just this thing happened first, then this, so they're automatically related. Things aren't automatically related because they happen in order. All right. Next. It says do not oversimplify effects. So you can't oversimplify the causes, but you can't oversimplify effects either. Uncontrolled enthusiasm. People get really excited, right? That's probably the biggest danger with oversimplifying effects. A writer might be able to present a strong case that an ill-conceived national health insurance program might have adverse effects on medical care. Okay, there could be a good argument there. If the writer predicts that millions of people will die of neglect in waiting lines in doctors' offices, then the writer's case and common sense is sure to be viewed skeptically. Right? So if someone wants to make an argument against a healthcare program, they can probably do that. But if they say the effects are going to be negative healthcare results for people, they can do that. But if they jump and say millions of people will end up dying, that's probably stretching it way too far for reasonable people to accept.
It's not even decent, they're not saying.
Right. They didn't make a good enough connection, possibly. So they got carried away and they over exaggerated their effects of this cause.
That has something to do with skepticism.
It's a logical fallacy. It's kind of like a generalization. Remember when I said you can use qualifying words to help avoid logical fallacies, where instead of saying like everybody will suffer or all of America will end up with terrible health care, you can use those qualifying words like most, many, some, right? You can use those words and that helps you avoid oversimplifying things. All right, next one. You must distinguish between direct and indirect causes and effects. Direct and indirect causes and effects. It says don't treat all causes and effects equally. Some are more remote than others, and the distinctions need to be made clear. When we talk about being more remote, we're talking about farther removed. All right, we're talking about distance here. Key word, distance. Key word, direct and indirect, distance from the events. Okay, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about direct and indirect. All right, here's the example the book gives. Bad design and incompetent management were direct causes of the Soviet nuclear disaster at Chernobyl in 1986. So there was a nuclear facility in Russia called Chernobyl, and it melted down. And it was a big accident. Spread radiation all over the place. You had 3-headed cows in the pastures after that, and many people getting sick and cancer. So, bad design and incompetent management were direct causes, which means they were close to the event, right? They were close to the meltdown. The centuries-old desire for cheap sources of energy was an indirect cause. So which happened first? The desire for the energy or the bad design?
The desire.
The desire for the energy was more further removed, right? It was further away. It was more distant to the actual event, right? It came long before it. So we're talking about distance and time.
What later?
It did. But it was indirect. The direct causes are closer to it. So direct means closer to, less distance between the event and the cause. Right. So bad design and incompetent management, those things like were real close to the event that actually happened. All right, but the desire for the energy had been around for a while. It was further removed. That was indirect. Okay? It says, though indirect causes and effects can sometimes be important, you need to set limits on how many of them you can deal with, or nearly every cause and effect essay will turn into a history of the world. That's true. Think about this. Think about this. This is a cause and effect chain, we said, right? Because we have an effect that also becomes a cause. These effects become a cause for increased property values. Think about this one. If I go back and do more indirect causes, watch what it could lead to. We have overcrowding in the schools. That was an effect of the people in town were having too much sex and too many babies, and there weren't enough condoms in the town. All right? Listen. They were having too much sex in the town because there was nothing to do in the town because the bowling alley shut down. The bowling alley shut down because the wife of the husband that owned the bowling alley, she cheated on him, and he became an alcoholic, and he decided to get rid of the bowling alley because it was too much work and he'd rather drink. And it was easy for him to drink because the liquor store actually sold really cheap booze. And the liquor store sold really cheap booze because there was a bootlegger in town. You see? So I could trace the desire for a new school and the increased property values goes all the way back to a bootlegger who was giving away free booze, right? Like cheap. There we go. So you see, do you see what happens? And we can say, and he was giving away cheap booze because he knew he was going to die the next day and didn't really need any money anyway. So honestly, if you keep going and you use your imagination, you could go all the way back to the beginning of time, right? You could trace any cause and effect back to the creation of the world and the dinosaurs if you wanted to. Okay? You could, right? So it's saying you have to limit your use of indirect causes, or else you're going to keep going back and back and back, and you're going to write a history of the world, which is way too daunting for a short essay assignment. Okay? All right, that's direct and indirect. You can probably understand that, but now I'm going to make it a little more confusing. Well, okay, let me take that back. The book's going to make it more confusing, and I'm going to make it less confusing. That's right. You must distinguish between major and minor causes and effects. Major and minor are not the same thing as direct and indirect. This is the hard part, because typically you would think major is the same as direct, and you would probably think minor is the same as indirect. That's what this has to do with. Major and minor has to do with importance. Direct and indirect has to do with what?
What did you guys say?
Why don't you take notes?
Well, I got
Distance.
There's nothing there.
Direct and indirect has to do with distance. Major and minor has to do with what? What'd you just say? Importance. Yes. They're different, right? Distance and importance are two different things. They're two different things. Good. Look, you see my book? Look, what does my book say? What does my book say there? What did I write? What are my notes?
Importance. This is
There it is.
important.
If you write that, you're probably okay. All right, I wrote distance next to direct and indirect, and I wrote importance next to major and minor. I need notes too. So, look at this example. The Confederacy's firing on Fort Sumter was a direct cause of the Civil War. All right, when somebody decided to pull the trigger on their musket or their rifle or whatever it was and fire a shot at Fort Sumter, that was the first shot of the Civil War. All right, that was a cause. And according to the book, it says it was a direct cause. Why was it direct? Okay, but according to the book, why was that a direct cause? When did the Civil War start? soon as he shot that gun.
And it's because he fell asleep, his elbow.
I don't know about that. The war started right then. When you fire a gun, that's usually the start of a war, right?
It's like one
How many
kid
people
said-
died during the Civil War? How many shots do you think were fired during the Civil War? A bunch. Hundreds of thousands of people died. So hundreds of thousands of shots were fired. So how important is one shot?
Was more important than all those shots.
Because it started.
Hold on a second. How important is just one shot? That's the only question I'm asking. How important is one shot in the Civil War? When you had 1 million shots fired, is one that important?
Yes.
Why?
Because it started the whole thing.
Okay, let me keep going, and then I'll ask you the question again.
Because it's direct.
The Confederacy's firing on Fort Sumter. What if the shot just hit the fence on the fort? Is it really that important?
Yeah, but it's a
Maybe he was aiming
defense
for the
thing.
fence.
He started the war. It's a defense thing.
Let me keep going.
Okay.
We have to iron this out. We have to. The Confederacy's firing on Fort Sumter was a direct cause because it happened right. Okay, it was direct. It happened right there. We're talking about distance when we talk about direct and indirect. There it was. Here's the start of the Civil War. Here's a shot fired. Can't get much more direct than that, right? Can't get any closer when we're talking about distance. But it was not nearly as important as the issues of secession and slavery. So, secession, wanting to break away from the country, that was a cause of the Civil War. Slavery was a cause of the Civil War. Those are big ideas, right? And so what was more important? The big idea of pulling away from the Union and this idea of keeping people as property, or one bullet that hit the fence? So now we're talking about importance.
Slavery and freedom.
So were those two things major or minor?
Secession and
Those are the
slavery.
majors. The shot fired was minor, even though it was direct. And the issues of slavery and secession, those were major.
If they had never shot that first shot, it would have never happened.
So, issues of slavery and secession, are they direct or indirect?
Indirect.
No,
Oh,
the shot was direct.
Because it was before.
It
the
was
shot
before,
done.
right? We're talking about distance, further removed. Which ones
Right.
came first?
Chicken
All right, you
and
got it?
Falls from the slavery come first.
All right, we're learning
Will
here.
y'all speak up over there?
Yeah, no,
They're
no,
listening.
enjoying it.
They're listening, right?
No, they're enjoying it. Taking that vote. We don't like
Good.
that when we're at their age.
All right, next. So we know the difference now. Direct and indirect, major, minor. Sometimes something could be minor and direct. Sometimes something could be major and indirect. Sometimes something could be major and direct. It just depends. All right, just depends. Let me ask you this. What would an indirect cause of those guys that we saw? They got shot with paint at the end of the video, right? What's an indirect cause of that?
The dominoes
The
fall.
first starting of it,
Good. The dominoes falling at the very beginning, right, is very indirect because it's so far removed. What about the fact that the band wanted to make a cool video? Is that major or minor? Is that a major or minor cause of them getting shot with paint? The fact that they wanted to make a really cool video. I'd say it's major too. And if you compare it to the dominoes, the dominoes are probably minor, and the fact that they wanted to make a cool video is major. Is more important, right? Good, you guys are getting it. I love it. All right.
See, that's what, in the beginning I said it was about creativity, because somebody had to have a thought.
Right. And that was a cause. That was a cause. The band's creativity, you could say, was a cause. Because that kind of came first. Right.
y'all understand?
Yes, they do. They're getting it. Well, they're going to struggle on the quiz then. All right. Bottom of page 197. Do not omit links in a chain of causes and effects. As previously noted, you may not always be faced with a separate set of causes for a particular effect, or separate effects from a particular cause. One cause leads to another, the second to a third, and so on. And only then is a given effect brought about. Unless you carefully discuss each part of the sequence, your reader may get lost. One effect of television, for example, may be a growing number of discipline problems in elementary and high school classrooms. But before you can persuade your reader of that point, you'll have to examine many intermediate effects, the effects that come between the watching of TV and the discipline problems in the classroom. right? TV by itself, watching TV does not cause a discipline problem in the classroom. However, if you say children watch TV and then they decide they want to act out, these television programs in the real world, and they go to school and that's their real world, and then they want to act out like the Power Rangers or whatever, and they end up hitting someone, now you can start to make that connection. But you can't just say TV causes the discipline problems unless you explore what?
Parents do try to make.
That's right. You could go back. Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you feel like that more indirect cause is important, you could address that. Just be careful about how far you go back. Okay, last thing for this chapter. It says you need to play fair. Give some attention, where appropriate, to causes and effects that opponents of your thesis may point to. You may justifiably want to pin the rioting at the rock concert on the police, but your case will be strengthened, not weakened, if you concede that the promoter's selling of more tickets than there were seats, and the attempt of a few fans to rush the stage and tear the clothes off the performers' backs also contributed to the disaster. You don't need to make a lavish production of these arguments on the other side. Just show that you're aware of them and have given them some consideration. So we talked about this with persuasive writing. If you show that you're aware of the other side's arguments, it makes your case stronger because it shows that you're aware of these things and you didn't just not hear about them, right? You didn't just pick your side because it's the only thing you knew. So it's okay to say you're aware of other potential causes. You just think this one is the most important. Does that make sense? Are we good on this chapter? How much time do we have? I hope my recording kept going. We've got plenty of time. All right, what we're going to do, we're going to take a look at this article and we are going to analyze it together. So all you really have to do is read it and keep in mind the cause and effect relationship.